This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Allow me to introduce you all to Crystal Renaud Day. She is CEO and founder of Living on Purpose, as well as its program, She Recovery, which is a virtual community for women facing porn and sexual addiction. Be aware that we love to do family-friendly programming, but you might want to listen to this first before your youngsters hear it, because Crystal is very authentic, very candid, and has tremendous expertise with many, many people who struggle with dark areas of their lives. We're so honored to have you, Crystal.
No, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be with you.
Her master's is in pastoral counseling from Liberty University. She has numerous certifications in counseling. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, ABC News. CNN has called her a pioneer in women's porn and sexual addiction recovery. And she lives with her husband in Kansas City, where I have enjoyed being many times and spent my early childhood. And we can hear you on your podcast, She Recovery, and I've listened to that many times and in getting to know you and preparing for this. And I'm most impressed with your work. Your story of your own beginning and being exposed to pornography starts early at age 10, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. I was exposed to pornography. And I'm 39 now. So this is 29 years ago. But at the age of 10, in my experience, it was with a magazine that was left needlessly behind in my brother's bathroom. But that exposure was enough to send me on a spiral. So,
yeah. Well, you have shared your story very movingly and honestly many places, and I encourage everyone to get out and get to know Crystal and her story more. But I would like to just highlight one moment today, and that was when you were heading to a Christian camp at, what was it, age 12, 14, something like that. And your hesitance was, tell why you were dreading going.
You know, I was actually kind of new to church. I hadn't been to church since I was much younger, about 8 years old or so. We just returned to church year 1999. I believe I was 14 when I started that church. And so by that following summer, I was 15. And my mom thought it'd be a great opportunity for me to go to summer camp. I had some classmates in school who were also part of the church who said, you should come to summer camp with us. It's a great experience. It terrified me, the thought of leaving home for that long, not because I was afraid of not being home, but because I couldn't watch porn. And because I couldn't engage in the behaviors that I had become so accustomed to by that age.
So that is certainly a sign of addiction and dependence on it, isn't it? Wow.
It is. Yes.
You have talked about how you felt so isolated by this addiction and this onslaught of the feelings you had, that you were never trained and taught how to rebuff and how to handle it any differently. Your whole adult life work has been to try to connect people to resources that can help them, and especially women. Why is it that you feel called specifically to reach out to women?
Yeah, I write about this and talk about this kind of frequently, that it was never my plan to make talking about pornography my life's work. That was definitely not something I sought out to do, didn't plan to do it. In fact, when I really received, I believe, the calling in the Spirit-led to do this, I was working at a church doing graphic design and media. So I really wasn't in a place that I was ready to wanting to do ministry in a way that is really person to person. I was really behind the scenes doing the media stuff. But I was on staff at a church, and I want to say this was 2007 or 2006 rather. I was 24 years old. I was on church staff. We had a pastor, my first real pastor that I can remember ever having. He had a moral failing, as I call it, where he had to resign and step down, or he was removed rather from leadership because of an affair that he'd been having, a long-term affair with another staff member who was actually my mentor at that time. And it really was kind of the catalytic event that God used to show me that I had had an experience, I had had a story, I had had a healing from sexual brokenness, and that sexual brokenness can impact even those that you least suspect. And understanding that me as a teenage girl, late adolescence, early 20s, still wrestling, feeling alone, feeling like I was the only one. I really felt like it was my obligation's the wrong word, but it was my responsibility to be that voice, to tell other women that they're not alone and that there is hope for meaningful recovery for them, because it happened to me. And I was one of them, and I was able to receive the healing that I needed and that they can too.
And you've certainly found, haven't you, that people both in and outside of the church are not aware of the extent of porn consumption by women, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You quote, I don't want to give its name because I don't want to give it publicity, but a major porn provider says a third of its customers are women.
Yeah.
And what percent of women would you say are dealing with porn addiction in the U.S.?
It's hard to say. We actually did a survey mid last year or late summer last year of women who identified as having been consumers of pornography, whether they admit they're in addiction or not. They admit that they watch porn. And the reason we did that survey was because of that porn site's annual report. They give a report every year of their traffic and what people are watching and all this stuff. And they said that 33% worldwide were women. As far as the United States, I believe it was 35% of their traffic was female. Understanding website statistics, that has to be registered users. That they don't just know that based on IP addresses, because you're not identifying a gender just by watching a website. So you're actually creating an account. And it was my understanding, or belief rather, that women are more secretive and they don't leave as much of a breadcrumb back to them in terms of their behavior. And so we did ask that question on the survey, like, have you ever created an account? And only, I think it was 86% had said no on that survey. So only like 13 or 14% had ever created an account. So if you think about the fact that a third of all porn traffic on this major, most popular porn site is female, you could only, and based on our survey, that only 13 or 14% actually created an account. I would say in the United States at this point that I would say conservatively, we're looking at 40% of women are frequently frequenting porn sites, whether it's recreational or whether it's addiction. I believe that's not an outrageous number.
Are we getting much more involvement with porn? And do you think if so, is it because people are just more open about it, or are we really consuming more?
I think we're definitely consuming more as a culture, as society. I think about pornography even in my era. 1996, for example, like when I stumbled upon that magazine, or 94, 95, porn magazines were still behind brown paper bags at uh, gas stations and
Mm-hmm.
different things. And so it wasn't as readily accessible as it is now, where you can just have a smartphone and access pornography for free all day long everywhere. And so I think with the accessibility of pornography, certainly that would translate to more use because it's so easily accessible. And we're seeing that translate into younger and younger consumers because they are either being shown by friends or they're stumbling upon it doing research for school or whatever it might be, and it's just so easy to access. And so for sure the numbers and the use have gone up significantly over the last 10, 5, 10, 15 years, and much more probably even since the pandemic in 2020 when people were
Mm-hmm.
home and isolated.
Mm-hmm. Um, I have this theory about porn, or as a lawyer, I tend to think of the word obscenity because porn isn't really a legal term, but um, thinking of in terms of evolutionary biology, which, regardless of what you think about creation and evolution,
Yeah.
I think it's mystifying to me why people are aroused by seeing other people in a sex act, whereas other mammals don't don't seem to respond to seeing that, except with perhaps aggression. But I think that there is something wired deep in us to think, or it's even not thinking, it's something beneath that, that if I see someone else spreading their DNA, you know, that I have this competitive, as a species, I just think I've got to contribute to my DNA. I should be doing that because they're going to create a tribe and I'm not. And I think there may be a deep wiring to be aroused by seeing this that is, very much non-spiritual. It's just very genetic and basic to us. And I think that some people spiritualize what happens when they see porn or they see intercourse or foreplay or whatever. That that they think there's something really demonic or they're a monster, or and we're wired to reproduce. We're wired to want to reproduce. And it's hard to resist because, in a sense, God said, be fruitful and multiply, get out there and do this. And our bodies don't think through the parameters for doing it.
Yeah.
Our bodies just know we're supposed to do
Yeah.
this. I remember I talked to a woman years ago, a woman who had never married, who was over 50, came to me. She called me in desperation, in tears, and said, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. And she came over, and she had been a missionary. And she came over and said, I have to tell somebody. I came across pornography on my computer and I looked at it. And I knew it was wrong. I knew I shouldn't be doing it. And I just spent like an hour looking at this, and it was very arousing. And I don't know what to do. Should I tell the pastor? I just feel so filthy. And I said, you are hardwired to reproduce. And yeah, it's a sin to pursue this kind of thing, but you weren't out looking for it, and you've never experienced this. And it was like, a whole new world. And she felt so condemned just by the fact that she had seen it. And I think that we need to give ourselves some slack about the very, very basic response that we have. It is disturbing though now, and I'm sure you're finding that pornography is not what it was 30, 50 years ago. How would you describe the changes in the content?
It's varying. Certainly, when you moved from print to video, things changed significantly because it was much more difficult. And I'll try to keep my words gentle here, or appropriate. Thinking about in terms of a sexual act on paper in a print is much harder to convey than in video. And so once video came into play, it became you could do a lot more and show a lot more and do a lot more in a video than you could in just a print, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly as even addiction or even consumers have an evolution when it comes to what they view. Oftentimes when a woman's first exposure to porn is maybe just an erotic novel and
Mm-hmm.
it's just words and print and story,
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't go into hardcore pornography as quickly. Whereas in my case, mine was a magazine that depicted sexual acts. And so that was hardcore pornography in terms of what was available at the time in print.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first exposure was already hard. So my appetite for it was starting hard and then had to get harder. Right.
Mm.
And so that's the evolution, even in terms of pornography now, is that what once satisfied the consumer no longer satisfies the consumer. And so you have to go to deeper, darker, more people, more things, more this or that. And
More
it becomes
violent.
more violent. That's a big one. More violence, less consent situations, things like that, where it almost it simulates assault. Unfortunately, in many of these cases, where
It's
it is
just
violent.
more transgressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, there's darker than that, and things that become illegal, and other things too that are also available these days. But not readily available, but are in the reality of what's happening. And that in itself is a progression in terms of what the consumer is demanding. It's not just that porn producers are creating this stuff thinking that they're like doing something new. Like this is also what the consumer who is in active addiction and their mind is starting to change is demanding and needing to get the same high or satisfaction that they once had experienced. And even in terms of demographics and consumer, the porn industry knows they have men hooked. Like that's like easy, right? We know men watch porn. It's almost accepted as a society that men watch porn. It's joked about in sitcoms. Like it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for women, that's a lesser discussed issue, right? And so when you're talking about pornography from a porn producer's perspective, they have the men and they have all the men or most men or whatever, but they also are looking for more consumers to make more money, to have more people involved in this. And so they're creating content that's created for women too, that is more of the story-based, romance-based, as a way to get you in and get into it as an introduction. And then, of course, with evolution of addiction and compulsion, you grow into your appetite there too. And at the same time, they're trying to pinpoint children too and entice children in their own unique ways, as through social media, through gaming, through all kinds of things. So the porn industry is ripe with opportunity for whatever you're looking for.
Well, I wonder if there is some legal liability that producers of porn are escaping by using CGI, computer graphics, rather than real characters. They don't have to pay them, they don't get
Yes.
liability for trafficking or false imprisonment or whatever is done to women and children or even men in the process of making sick porn. Is there more that is virtual porn that, because it also seems like maybe that's more expensive to produce? I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, the new thing is AI, artificial intelligence, right? And so they're figuring out ways of creating content that, again, is not real people. So they're not having to, they're not at risk and, talking about the more extreme porn, talking about it in terms of children, even, unfortunately, you don't have to have a child that is real on a screen being filmed and have it being called, child sexual abuse content or child porn, but it's still child porn because it's depicting a child doing sexual acts. And so that is the idea of like how virtual reality, AI, all of that is actually going to, and we talk about this with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, talking about the risk of that, because because what the problem with porn is that oftentimes what you see in a video makes you want to have it in real life. And so there's a lot of difficulty with, or a lot of issues with men or women who are watching porn and want to mimic what they're seeing in real life. And so you end up in a relationship or with a one-night stand or with a prostitute, etc., and want to perform what you're seeing in porn with that person, right? And so the same thing is true that if you're engaging in AI or virtual reality with someone that looks like a minor, with someone that looks like a child, that's going to change your sexual appetite, because that's how porn works. And so there's a greater risk that if you're going to use AI and actually engage in these things, that you're going to escalate that into an in-person encounter, and that's going to be obviously crime. And so there's a lot of concern about the rise in AI and virtual reality when it comes to porn, because of what they're able to depict and how that might translate into reality.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the victims in these films of real people might talk, and they might go to law enforcement, whereas with these fake images, nobody's going to tell. And
no one's going to say, "Guy's watching child porn." Yeah.
Well, one of the concerns that a lot of people have expressed is that kids are not just becoming younger and younger consumers of porn, but they're actually producers now. They are producing what's called nudes, which is texting and other forms of just photographing themselves without clothes or in sexual positions. And when you have a 10-year-old or 12-year-old producing those images, then it's becoming a very murky legal landscape for what you do, what law enforcement should do, what parents should do when they find out that their child is voluntarily doing this with their own little camera in their bedroom. What are you finding in terms of people engaging in that and wanting to deal with that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of personal experience working with children who are doing that, but I do with the adult women that we work with. They're on dating apps, they're on different things, they are sending nudes, they are sexting, they are engaging in that as they want to say that it's not as bad as watching porn, but you're making yourself into the porn, so it is. And obviously anything you send on a message or online is forever. That person, you can't get it back. And so that risks, you can risk your job, your family, all kinds of things with doing that kind of behavior. But certainly as a passion point, I do speak to parents quite often about just the need to be a parent and to be monitoring and being aware of what your child may or may not be doing and the legal consequences of if they're caught with even a picture of themselves that is in many jurisdictions considered child pornography. And they
Wow.
can, at 12 years old, be convicted of a sex crime and be registered as a sex offender. And so there
Wow.
is major risk here. And I'm not sure that that's wrong. I think that if you're creating porn of yourself and sending it and using it and having it on you, like there needs to be consequences for that, whether they're legal consequences, whether you're, because obviously children don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how to make good choices, and how don't have the cognitive ability to make good choices. And so those are lifelong consequences if you were to be convicted of something. But parents need to be aware that like that's a major issue and the
Mhm.
major risk, but not just for the legal reasons, but personal, like your heart and your emotions and your person and what you're in, and your self-worth, that you're worth
Mhm.
more than sending naked pictures of yourself to strangers or to friends. Like you're worth more than that. And it's really important for me to to have parents just be motivated and implored to be parents, and to say you have the right to tell your kids no, and to put parameters and boundaries and restrictions on technology so that they can be safe.
Yeah, I talked to a woman here in Oklahoma who specializes in speaking to children about online safety and cyberbullying and sexting issues, things like that. And I said, "What is your main advice to parents? And if you could tell parents one thing." And she said, "Get off your devices. Parents, you are not paying attention. You're
Yeah.
so constantly on your social media and your devices that you're not aware that your kids are doing all manner of things,
Yeah.
and they're developing their own culture of which you know nothing because you're not engaged." And I was really hit with that, and it is hypnotizing for all of us to have these phones that offer all kinds of things in our hands.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you're addressing this, because I think it coarsens society. And I read one survey of jurors. They did experiments on these were not real cases, but they presented jurors with pornography, and they showed them like an hour and a half or 2 hours of porn videos that um, were not just about rape situations, but included that, but all kinds of pornography. And then they had those who had been exposed to that um, adjudicate a case and be serve on a jury in a fake case, and then a control group that had not been exposed. And the
Mm,
jurors who had been exposed to pornography were much more lenient in conviction on rape and in sentencing.
mhm,
And
mhm.
um, it it's interesting how uh, porn seems to cheapen the view of the value of life itself, the dignity of the human person, the dignity, the sanctity of the body, in ways that soak out into other areas and would affect how we operate legally and how we treat other people in non-sexual situations.
It does. We've seen that a lot in several different studies, talking about the impact that pornography has on how we see humans and how we see each other, particularly how men see women see men, just in terms of, or even in terms of like how you would interpret a rape or an assault or anything else. And seeing much more leniency in that, when in fact, well, we would never have felt that way if it happened to our sister or our mother or our wives. but because pornography has distorted your view of the human body and the human person, that carries over into in person, just like I was talking about with virtual reality. Just because it's not real, meaning not real in front of you as a real person sitting in the same room with you, it's going to impact how you see reality. Because it's changing your brain. It's changing, you're becoming more and more desensitized to these kind of acts, and it's scary.
Yeah, they've shown physiologically that you do develop a higher threshold for what you find satisfying and stimulating, that a higher threshold for what produces the pleasure in your brain, that it is changing you, whether you want it to or not. You think it doesn't because there's a lag time. It's not obvious. It doesn't happen immediately. You don't look any different, but it's changing you from the inside, and it's so destructive. I was in a group with Syrian women a couple of years ago who had come to a women's conference. These were mostly pastors' wives from Syria who had Syrian churches. And obviously, this is essentially a war zone experience that they were coming out of. And we asked the women, if you could work on one thing in your community to change, what would you like to work on? And we'll see if we can help you. And with all of the needs in Syria, you know what they said they wanted to work on? Pornography. And many of them wept and talked about how many men in their churches and even women in their churches were using porn. And I thought, wow, we just never escape this. I mean, you'd think when you're in a life or death situation, you're not thinking about, you know, those kinds of things, but it's an area that brings comfort and immediate pleasure in a way. It brings a release and that is impersonal, and maybe that's something that is part of the attraction of porn. It isn't intimacy; it's kind of the opposite of it. But maybe that is something that is part of the appeal of it, that I don't have to be interpersonal and consider the other person's feelings in a healthy relationship. I just go for what feels good. And I wondered how many of the women themselves, especially those who were weeping, were, themselves involved in it. And we didn't go that deeply. I wish you could have been there and had some personal conversations, but it was pretty astounding.
Yeah,
It's everywhere.
it is everywhere. I think going back to the statistics we were talking about with that one porn site, America, the United States, is actually one of the lower female rates in terms of users, and actually the Philippines was the most. 51% was women from the Philippines. So we had more women in the Philippines watching porn than men in terms of registered accounts. And so pornography is pervasive. It is worldwide. It doesn't care if you're a man or a woman. It doesn't care if you're an adult or a child. It doesn't matter if you speak English or any other language. It transcends everything, which if you think about sex is a human experience. It affects every human at some point in their life. And so it's not going to discriminate when it comes to pornography. It's not going to discriminate against anyone or anywhere. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell us briefly about what it is that your work does, the approach you take in trying to bring healing and bring recovery to the women who come to you.
My biggest passion or philosophy really is that addiction is not a lifelong sentence. It doesn't have to be a lifelong sentence. And so if you're wrestling with pornography and you're watching pornography, whether you identify it as an addiction or not, it is not something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. Healing and wholeness are available for you. And our approach to it really is to look less at the behavior, look less at the what, and look at the why you're doing it underneath that behavior. Because there's always a why. It's not just, in my experience, it's not just carnal, it's not just animal, it's not just a thing you need because you're a sexual being. There's something it's providing you that is beyond the physical, beyond just the act itself. And so we, as an organization, offer that coaching and counseling services to help you to navigate the why and to heal it and to work on it and to really be set free from the why so that you don't need porn anymore. But we also offer our virtual recovery meetings, and those are just a time for women who are on this recovery journey, or at the beginning or middle or the end of the recovery journey, to engage with other women who are on a similar journey, and to experience prayer and discipleship and support and accountability. And we have other services as well, but that's really the main two things that we offer are those coaching and counseling services and our groups, which is really about getting you into community, getting you out from isolation, getting you out from hiding this, out from underneath shame, because guilt and shame are not great motivators for change. And so we want to help you to not experience that shame, but to experience the reality that you're not the only one. Let's get you into community. Let's get you out of hiding. Because addiction loves isolation and it's bred in isolation. So if we can get you out of that, it goes a long way to seeing a successful recovery journey.
Well, thank you so much for the courage that you have displayed in taking on this problem. And I just wish you well in it. I would love to have you on again and talk about other aspects of what you are learning. And would you come back, Crystal?
I would. I'd be happy to. Yes.
Thanks. Where should people go to find out more and access the work that you're doing and get help?
Yeah, the easiest way to connect with us is on our website at sherecovery.com. And it's just like it sounds, pronoun she, recovery.com. And we would love to have you and see you there.
Thank you. All right. We'll keep that in mind, and everyone check it out. Bye-bye. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish.